In Victorian England, dating was not a casual or spontaneous affair, but a highly structured and often suffocating performance, dictated by a labyrinth of social codes, etiquette, and unspoken rules that left young men and women constantly vigilant, anxious, and painfully self-conscious, for every glance, gesture, or word could be scrutinized as evidence of virtue, impropriety, or social ambition, and the consequences of a misstep could range from whispered gossip to permanent social ostracism, effectively determining the course of one's romantic life before it even began. A young woman, for instance, was expected to move with graceful restraint, maintain an expression of modesty at all times, and carefully measure her speech to avoid even the slightest hint of impropriety, while young men were judged not only for manners and moral character, but also for their wealth, family standing, and perceived ability to provide a secure future, transforming courtship into an elaborate dance of appearances rather than an organic exchange of feelings. Every meeting between prospective suitors was closely observed, often by chaperones who served as the vigilant guardians of propriety, monitoring body language, posture, and conversation for signs of emotional indiscretion. And even casual social gatherings were imbued with this underlying tension, as families, friends, and neighbors were ready to interpret the smallest action as a coded signal of romantic intent, gossip, or social climbing. The environment created by these codes encouraged indirect communication, where interest had to be signaled through subtle gestures, carefully worded letters, and the strategic use of calling cards, each laden with multiple layers of meaning and expectation, turning something as simple as a smile or a polite bow into a carefully calculated act of social signaling. Clothing and appearance were additional layers of this rigid system. Women were expected to wear garments that reflected their virtue and social rank, including corsets, high-necked dresses, and carefully arranged hair, while men adhered to strict standards of dress that communicated respectability, taste, and stability, all designed to maintain an aura of decorum while simultaneously demonstrating suitability as a partner. And any deviation from these standards could be read as a moral failing or lack of social polish. This codified environment forced young people to suppress spontaneity, humor, and genuine emotional expression, creating a courtship process that was exhausting, frustrating, and often alienating, as participants learned to mask true feelings under layers of performance, formality, and self-restraint, while the fear of public censure, gossip, or misinterpretation loomed over every interaction like a persistent shadow, ensuring that even the most innocent or natural behavior could be misread as improper or ambitious. Furthermore, the slow pace of communication, the need for family approval, and the pervasiveness of social surveillance meant that courtship often progressed at a glacial speed, leaving young people in a constant state of anxious anticipation and overanalysis, reading hidden meanings into each gesture, letter, or compliment, and experiencing frustration at the artificial barriers imposed between desire and action. In essence, Victorian dating was less about human connection or emotional exploration, and more about performing a socially acceptable narrative, a meticulous balancing act between propriety and interest, where the rules themselves often overshadowed the people trying to connect, rendering courtship a complex, emotionally taxing, and sometimes comically rigid enterprise that left young men and women longing for freedom, spontaneity, and genuine intimacy in a society that valued appearance and decorum above all else. In Victorian England, the pursuit of romantic connection was rarely a matter of personal choice or emotional spontaneity. Instead, it was almost entirely mediated by the approval and supervision of family members, making courtship a careful negotiation in which young men and women had to balance their own feelings with the exacting expectations of parents and guardians, who were tasked with safeguarding not only the moral character, but also the social and financial prospects of their children. And this omnipresent oversight meant that love could seldom progress naturally, as each gesture, visit, or written correspondence had to pass the scrutiny of those whose judgment was deemed paramount, transforming the simple desire to express affection into an exhausting and protracted process of performance, patience, and subtlety, where every interaction was filtered through the lens of propriety, wealth, and social status. Families monitored the minutiae of courtship with astonishing thoroughness. Young men were evaluated for their income, prospects for advancement, family connections, moral rectitude, and ability to provide security, while young women were scrutinized for beauty, poise, temperament, domestic skills, and, most importantly, their reputation. For a single hint of impropriety could compromise not only her own prospects, but the standing of the entire family. And the pressure to conform to these standards created an environment of constant vigilance, anxiety, and tension, where neither silence nor overt affection was ever truly safe. Visits were arranged according to strict schedules. Letters were carefully crafted to avoid any suggestion of impropriety, and even casual interactions in public spaces were monitored for perceived hints of favoritism or impropriety, meaning that young people spent as much time navigating social expectations as they did attempting to connect emotionally, and every sign of mutual interest had to be coded, subtle, and recognizable to the recipient without attracting negative attention from those charged with supervision. Financial considerations further amplified the stakes of family involvement. Dowries, inheritances, social rank, and connections were all critical, and families often encouraged or discouraged matches based on pragmatic considerations rather than emotional compatibility, creating situations in which affection and attraction were subordinated to strategy, negotiation, and social calculation, and where disappointment, frustration, and longing became nearly inevitable companions. This intricate web of expectations required young people to develop a sophisticated awareness of social cues, the capacity for subtle communication, and a patient resilience, as they attempted to demonstrate interest without overstepping bounds, maintain moral and social respectability, and secure the approval of parents who held the ultimate power to advance or terminate the courtship at any moment, meaning that love was a careful dance rather than a spontaneous expression, and the psychological strain of balancing personal desire with family oversight shaped a generation's experience of courtship, leaving many to experience longing, suppressed emotion, and the constant tension between what they wished for personally and what society demanded. In essence, Victorian dating under family supervision was a meticulously choreographed social drama in which the stakes extended far beyond mere emotional satisfaction, encompassing social standing, financial security, and familial honor, and where the ability to navigate the complex rules subtly signal interest and maintain propriety determine not only the course of romance, but also the trajectory of a young person's entire social life, making the approval of family the single most powerful, shaping, and often suffocating force in the process of Victorian courtship. In Victorian England, chaperones were not merely formalities or social companions, but a pervasive and defining force in the courtship process, ensuring that every interaction between young men and women conformed to the exacting standards of propriety and social expectation, and in doing so, they transformed what might have been natural romantic engagement into a highly monitored performance in which spontaneity, intimacy, and personal freedom were almost entirely curtailed, creating an atmosphere in which every gesture, word, and glance had to be carefully calculated, interpreted, and executed with precision to avoid scandal, gossip, or disapproval from both the chaperone and the surrounding social network. These supervising figures, often older relatives or trusted family friends, acted as both enforcers of morality and silent witnesses to courtship, their watchful presence dictating the pace, location, and even the content of social interactions, which meant that young couples could seldom meet in private and were instead forced to conduct all forms of communication, from casual conversation to carefully coded displays of affection under a constant and scrutinizing gaze, where any misstep could compromise reputation or halt the progress of the relationship entirely. The need to navigate this environment created a complex system of indirect signaling, in which subtle gestures, a carefully timed smile, a tilt of the head, or the strategic placement of a calling card carried meanings that were intelligible only to the intended recipient but invisible to the chaperone, requiring both creativity and acute social awareness, and transforming courtship into a psychological game of observation, interpretation, and performance, where one's social intelligence was as critical as one's charm, good manners, or appearance. Public venues such as drawing rooms, promenades, or afternoon teas became stages for these carefully orchestrated interactions, and the social rules governing them were extensive and unforgiving. The distance maintained between a man and woman while walking, the proper manner of initiating or ending conversation, the tone and subject matter of discussion, and the degree of eye contact were all highly regulated, leaving little room for genuine spontaneity and forcing courtship into a series of rehearsed, cautious, and often painfully slow exchanges, which could span months or even years before reaching the point of private, unsupervised engagement. This ever-present oversight also reinforced gender norms and hierarchical expectations, as young women were taught to display modesty, passivity, and poise, while young men were expected to demonstrate restraint, decorum, and financial and social readiness, all under the critical eyes of chaperones, whose judgments were final and whose influence could determine the ultimate success or failure of a courtship, meaning that love, desire, and personal compatibility were consistently subordinated to the imperatives of social propriety, reputation, and family approval. The psychological effects of this system were profound. Couples often experienced a mix of tension, anticipation, frustration, and longing, as the artificial barriers imposed by chaperones amplified emotions and made small gestures fraught with meaning, while simultaneously limiting opportunities for authentic connection or emotional experimentation, leaving young people to navigate a delicate dance of concealment and expression, subtlety and compliance, all in an effort to maintain social respectability while pursuing affection, and ensuring that courtship in Victorian society was a complex, emotionally taxing, highly regulated, and almost theatrical process that demanded both patience and strategic intelligence, where the ultimate reward, love, companionship, and eventual marriage was often contingent upon successfully performing within the narrow bounds set by society and its vigilant enforcers. In Victorian England, when the presence of chaperones and the rigid social rules of propriety severely limited private meetings between young men and women, letter writing became the primary and often only legitimate channel for courtship, transforming the act of communication into a painstaking, emotionally charged, and highly codified ritual in which every word, phrase, and punctuation mark had to be meticulously considered to ensure both propriety and the conveyance of interest. And the delays inherent in this slow form of correspondence amplified anxiety, anticipation, and the weight of social expectation, making the writing and receiving of letters an experience that was simultaneously thrilling, terrifying, and exhausting. These letters were not casual notes, but carefully crafted documents in which affection had to be expressed indirectly through subtle language, metaphor, and carefully chosen compliments, always mindful that the family or chaperone who might intercept the letter would deem it appropriate, morally sound, and reflective of the writer's respectability, and even the slightest misstep of phrase to forward a sentiment, a word with ambiguous meaning, could provoke scandal, embarrassment, or social censure, potentially ruining the delicate progression of a courtship before it could reach maturity. The process of composing letters required young people to exercise extraordinary patience, literary skill, and psychological insight as they attempted to express genuine affection while carefully navigating the codes of decorum, social rank, and moral expectation, turning something as natural as expressing desire or admiration into a deliberate exercise in strategy, subtlety, and emotional restraint. Letters often became the principal medium through which young lovers conveyed their thoughts, hopes, anxieties, and even minor flirtations. But each message had to be sufficiently vague to remain socially acceptable while still intelligible to the intended recipient, a delicate balance that demanded a nuanced understanding of both language and social perception, and left the writer perpetually fearful that any misinterpretation could derail months of carefully cultivated social interaction. The inherent slowness of postal delivery added another layer of tension and anticipation, as replies could take days or even weeks to arrive, and during that time, young people were left to speculate feelings and intentions of the other party, creating a fertile ground for both excitement and anxiety, where every imagined pause, delay, or omission could be interpreted as a signal of disinterest, disapproval, or even scandalous circumstance, further intensifying the emotional stakes of courtship. Beyond the mechanics of letter writing itself, these correspondences were often preserved, reread, and analyzed for subtle signals, making the act of writing a letter a performative and psychologically demanding exercise, where every line carried not just personal expression, but social consequence. Families frequently monitored letters for propriety, ensuring that nothing inappropriate or socially damaging could be communicated, reinforcing the role of courtship as a complex negotiation between desire and social expectation. Ultimately, in an era where personal interaction was constrained by etiquette, supervision, and social surveillance, letters became the lifeline of romantic connection, providing the only sanctioned space for emotional expression and intimacy, but doing so under conditions of extreme caution, formality, and anticipation, creating a courtship experience defined as much by anxiety, patience, and subtlety as by love or attraction, and leaving young Victorians perpetually caught between the exhilaration of secret affection and the ever-present weight of social expectation. In Victorian England, calling cards were not merely small pieces of paper for introductions, but an entire system of coded social communication, a ritualized and often absurd practice that dictated much of courtship and social interaction, transforming what could have been a simple greeting into a complex, highly scrutinized act fraught with meaning, expectation, and potential for misinterpretation. And these tiny rectangles carried a weight far greater than their size would suggest, serving as tangible representations of social rank, personal interest, and propriety. The way a card was written, presented, received, and displayed was imbued with symbolic significance, with variations in handwriting, phrasing, embellishment, and timing conveying subtle messages about one's intentions, status, and even degree of interest, creating a system in which the smallest mistakes, tending a card too early, too late, or to the wrong household member, could result in gossip, disapproval, or the abrupt end of a budding courtship. For young men, presenting a calling card to a potential suitor's household was a careful exercise in negotiation and strategy, a public performance in which they had to display respect, restraint, and a full awareness of the family's expectations, while signaling personal interest in a manner subtle enough to avoid impropriety. And for young women, receiving and displaying cards was equally fraught, as their acceptance, placement, or return of a card could signal consent, disinterest, or social strategy, all under the watchful eyes of parents, chaperones, and neighbors, who interpreted these actions according to complex and often rigid rules, turning what could have been a simple acknowledgement of acquaintance into an intricate code that demanded literacy, patience, and social intelligence. The absurdity of this system became even more pronounced considering the minor material differences between cards, such as size, embossing, or the inclusion of decorative flourishes, each carrying distinct connotations about wealth, taste, and seriousness of intent, while the order and timing of delivery conveyed subtle messages about priority and favor, forcing young people to consider not only their own presentation, but the reactions of multiple observers, social hierarchies, and the unspoken expectations of etiquette manuals, which often contradicted common practice and varied by region, class, and family preference. Beyond these technicalities, calling cards also created a performative dimension to courtship that emphasized appearance, patience, and calculation over spontaneity, turning interactions into a prolonged, anxiety-laden game where social competence could determine the success or failure of romantic pursuit, and where the thrill of mutual attraction was constantly mediated by symbols, codes, and ceremonial gestures rather than genuine conversation or emotional expression. Families, chaperones, and social peers closely monitored the use of cards, ensuring that no impropriety or misstep could occur, reinforcing the notion that courtship was less a personal affair than a public performance in which every act, no matter how small, was a test of judgment, decorum, and strategic social awareness. In essence, the calling card system exemplified the peculiar, restrictive, and often comically intricate nature of Victorian dating, turning human connection into a codified ritual where even a simple visit could require meticulous planning, and where the tiny rectangle of paper carried the full weight of social expectation, propriety, and potential romantic destiny, leaving young men and women both fascinated and frustrated by a system that valued formality over emotion, calculation over spontaneity, and symbolism over authentic human connection, perfectly encapsulating why dating in Victorian England could be simultaneously exhausting, absurd, and overwhelmingly rigid. In Victorian England, the rigid social hierarchy profoundly influenced every aspect of life, including courtship and marriage, creating a situation in which love between individuals of different social classes was not only frowned upon, but often deemed socially impossible, effectively constraining romantic choice to a narrow spectrum defined by wealth, status, and family lineage, and ensuring that emotional attraction alone was rarely sufficient to sustain a relationship in the eyes of society. Young men and women were acutely aware that crossing class boundaries could provoke scandal, gossip, and even familial disownment, and as a result, courtship became a delicate negotiation in which personal feelings had to be carefully weighed against social acceptability, creating a pervasive tension between desire and duty that characterized much of Victorian romance. Families who were deeply invested in maintaining or improving their social position rigorously enforced these boundaries, evaluating potential partners for their economic stability, inherited wealth, professional prospects, and social connections, often discouraging or forbidding any relationship deemed inappropriate, regardless of the intensity of mutual attraction. And this created a social environment in which young people were forced to suppress feelings for those outside their class while seeking approval for matches that met the exacting standards of wealth, respectability, and status. The consequences of violating these norms were severe. Relationships across class lines risked public scandal, the erosion of family reputation, and the withdrawal of financial support, which could compromise a young person's future prospects and social security. And this pressure reinforced the perception that love and romance were privileges reserved for those whose social positions aligned, leaving emotional compatibility secondary to economic and social considerations. Furthermore, the economic dimension of class differences added additional layers of complexity, as the ability to fund proper courtship through gifts, outings, social events, and clothing was often impossible for those of lower financial means, rendering the very act of participation in acceptable courtship rituals unattainable for anyone outside the upper classes, and forcing many young people into relationships dictated more by material necessity and social strategy than by genuine affection or attraction. This rigid class framework also dictated behavioral norms, as the language, manners, and conduct expected of participants were heavily stratified by social rank, meaning that individuals from different classes often lacked the shared codes necessary for a socially sanctioned relationship, further entrenching the barriers to romantic connection and ensuring that interactions between classes were limited, formal, and fraught with social anxiety. Even seemingly minor transgressions, such as visiting the wrong part of town, attending inappropriate social gatherings, or corresponding without parental approval, could draw criticism and social sanction, creating an environment in which love was constantly mediated by class-conscious surveillance, social expectation, and economic practicality, and leaving young people to navigate a landscape in which the heart's desire was rarely sufficient to overcome the structural constraints imposed by Victorian society. Ultimately, the intersection of social class, economic resources, and family expectations transformed courtship into a calculated exercise in strategy, self-restraint, and negotiation, making romantic connections across class lines extraordinarily rare, fraught with risk, and often impossible, and demonstrating that, in Victorian England, matters of the heart were inseparable from matters of wealth, social position, and familial obligation, leaving young lovers constrained, frustrated, and painfully aware of the invisible walls built by society to separate them according to rank and privilege. In Victorian England, the cost of courtship was a significant barrier that dictated who could participate in romantic pursuits and under what conditions, turning what might have been a simple exchange of affection into an elaborate, financially demanding process in which young men and women were expected to demonstrate not only their moral character and social standing, but also their ability to maintain appearances, support social rituals, and conform to the expectations of a rigidly stratified society, creating an environment in which love alone was insufficient to establish a relationship, and financial capacity became as important as charm or personal compatibility. From the earliest stages of courtship, expenses mounted quickly, as young men were expected to purchase elegant calling cards, attend expensive social gatherings, give gifts appropriate to the lady's status, and dress in fashions that conveyed both refinement and wealth, all of which required careful planning, substantial resources, an ongoing expenditure that could easily exceed the means of those without considerable family support or independent wealth. Social outings, including promenade walks, dinners, theater, visits, and formal dances, were not casual affairs, but meticulously orchestrated events in which clothing, transportation, and etiquette signaled social position, and failure to meet these standards could result in embarrassment, rejection, or damage to one's reputation, ensuring that courtship was as much a financial performance as a romantic endeavor. Young women also bore indirect costs, from investing in proper attire, accessories, and grooming to maintaining a household or social circle capable of hosting visitors, all of which demonstrated both status and propriety and reinforced the transactional nature of Victorian dating. Gifts were another critical component of the financial demands of courtship, carefully chosen to reflect taste, refinement, and social awareness, ranging from jewelry and flowers to books, stationery, or delicate keepsakes. And the mismanagement of these expectations through omission, excess, or poor judgment could be interpreted as a lack of seriousness, taste, or financial stability, further emphasizing the inseparable link between wealth, propriety, and perceived suitability for marriage. Even letters carried economic dimensions, as the cost of paper, ink, and delivery combined with the effort of careful composition and adherence to formal etiquette to make each written word a reflection of the writer's social awareness and financial investment in the relationship, with families often reviewing correspondence for propriety and ensuring that the pre-expenditure of resources aligned with social expectations. This constant pressure created a form of courtship in which financial capability, attention to detail, and the management of appearances were intertwined with emotional expression, meaning that romantic success required not only charm and compatibility, but also strategic economic planning and the ability to meet or exceed societal standards, often leaving those of limited means frustrated, anxious, or entirely excluded from the processes of courtship. Ultimately, the expense of proper courtship in Victorian society reinforced class boundaries, emphasized social display, and transformed the pursuit of love into an elaborate ritual of economic performance, strategic spending, and careful social management, demonstrating that matters of the heart were inseparable from the realities of wealth and status, and that young people seeking romantic fulfillment had to navigate a world in which money, taste, and propriety were as vital as affection, desire, or personal connection, leaving courtship an intricate, demanding, and emotionally taxing endeavor where financial preparedness could determine the very possibility of love. In Victorian England, the practice of dowries, inheritances, and financial negotiations was not merely a side consideration in courtship, but a central determinant of marital possibility, profoundly shaping the lives, choices, and emotional experiences of young men and women. As these financial arrangements functioned as both a measure of social status and a tool of family strategy, transforming marriage into a transactional exercise where love and attraction were often secondary to economic calculations and social security. For young women, a dowry represented not only financial contribution to the future household, but also a signal of familial wealth, social rank, and cultural sophistication, and its presence or absence could decisively influence the willingness of prospective suitors and their families to consider a match, meaning that even the most desirable qualities or moral virtue could be overshadowed by the lack of an adequate financial endowment. Families treated these arrangements with meticulous care, negotiating sums, property, and assets with precision, often consulting legal experts, accountants, and social advisors to ensure that the marriage would advance, preserve, or protect the family's financial and social interests. While young men were similarly evaluated for their ability to provide a stable, secure, and respectable household, ensuring that the union would maintain or enhance familial prestige and economic advantage, and that the social order remained firmly entrenched. These financial considerations dictated the timing, pace, and very possibility of courtship. Engagements were delayed until dowries could be secured or inheritances confirmed. Correspondence and social visits were closely monitored to ensure propriety and appropriateness, and families wielded veto power with little regard for the emotional desires of the individuals involved, effectively transforming the pursuit of love into a negotiation between competing financial, social, and moral imperatives. Beyond monetary exchanges, the negotiation of dowries and inheritances also reinforced gender and class hierarchies, as women were often positioned as transmitters of family wealth and social capital, while men were expected to demonstrate the capacity to manage, preserve, and increase these assets, creating an environment in which personal merit was inseparable from economic utility, and romantic compatibility could be subordinated to the practicalities of wealth consolidation. Even seemingly trivial elements, such as the inclusion of jewelry, furniture, or property rights, carried symbolic weight, signaling family respectability, prudence, and social sophistication. And these symbols were carefully evaluated by all parties to judge character, seriousness of intent, and suitability for the alliance, further emphasizing the intricate intertwining of money, morality, and romance. This financial framework, while designed to safeguard family wealth and social position, imposed immense psychological pressure on young people who had to navigate these obligations, interpret social signals, and perform within the boundaries set by both economic expectation and emotional desire, often leaving courtship fraught with anxiety, strategic calculation, and constrained personal expression. Ultimately, dowries, inheritances, and financial bargaining defined Victorian romance, ensuring that matters of the heart were inseparable from matters of wealth, status, and familial strategy, and leaving young men and women acutely aware that love alone could rarely secure a marriage without careful negotiation, economic preparation, and strict adherence to the rigid social rules that governed both affection and financial propriety. In Victorian England, the choice of whom to marry was never solely a matter of affection or personal preference. It was deeply entwined with the rigid hierarchies of class, making the concepts of marrying up or marrying down central to courtship and the success or failure of relationships, and creating a landscape in which love, desire, and compatibility were constantly mediated by calculations of social advantage and risk as families, friends, and communities closely monitored every potential match to ensure that alliances reinforced or elevated social position rather than threatened it. And young people were acutely aware that a misstep could have lifelong consequences for reputation, financial security, and familial prestige. Marrying up, in which a person sought a partner from a higher social class, could offer access to wealth, influence, and improved social standing. But it also brought immense pressure to conform to unfamiliar cultural norms, expectations, and codes of conduct, and often provoked suspicion or resistance from the family of the higher-ranked partner, who might question the suitability, refinement, or morality of the lower-class suitor, creating a delicate balancing act in which charm, manners, and subtle performance could determine whether ambition and affection could coexist successfully within the confines of Victorian propriety. Conversely, marrying down entailed risks of social censure, gossip, and the perception of impropriety, as families feared that aligning with a lower status partner could diminish prestige, compromise financial stability, and attract social judgment, leaving the individuals involved to to navigate a minefield of criticism and emotional strain, often while concealing genuine attraction or affection from those whose approval was essential. The intricate interplay of social perception, family approval, and personal ambition meant that courtship was rarely spontaneous or emotionally straightforward. Every gesture, invitation, and conversation was carefully calculated to demonstrate respectability, competence, and suitability for the desired social tier, while simultaneously signaling emotional interest in a way that would not provoke disapproval, scandal, or embarrassment. In this context, marriages were frequently as much strategic alliances as romantic unions, designed to preserve or enhance family wealth, consolidate influence, or maintain the hierarchical order. And individuals were trained from a young age to recognize the value of social currency, to negotiate subtly within it, and to understand that affection without status often had little practical consequence. The tension between personal desire and social expectation created profound psychological and emotional complexity as young people balanced longing, frustration, ambition, and social calculation, developing a nuanced understanding of human behavior, social norms, and the consequences of all within a system in which marriage could dictate lifelong social mobility, reputation, and financial security. Ultimately, the rigid structures surrounding marrying up or marrying down ensured that Victorian courtship was never solely about love or emotional connection, but about navigating a complex social ecosystem in which every choice carried implications for family, wealth, and class, leaving young men and women perpetually negotiating between personal desire and societal expectation, and illustrating how deeply intertwined social hierarchy and romance were in shaping the possibilities, frustrations, and absurdities of Victorian love. In Victorian England, the rigid social hierarchies and class-conscious nature of courtship created profound emotional strain for young men and women, as the pursuit of love was never purely personal or spontaneous, but was constantly mediated by the expectations of family, society, and economic reality, generating a psychological landscape in which desire, anxiety, frustration, and longing were inextricably entwined with social obligation, reputation, and financial considerations, leaving individuals to navigate a path where genuine emotional connection was often subordinated to duty, propriety, and strategic calculation, and where even the most heartfelt feelings could be constrained, suppressed, or redirected by external pressures. The awareness that every gesture, word, or decision could have lasting consequences on one's social standing or familial approval created a persistent state of tension, in which young people were forced to reconcile their personal desires with societal expectations, often resulting in prolonged periods of uncertainty and emotional exhaustion that could extend over months or even years. The combination of class consciousness and economic scrutiny meant that romantic feelings were rarely acted upon freely, as any misalignment between social status, wealth, or family expectations could render a potential match impossible, leaving many young lovers in a constant state of longing for relationships that were theoretically desirable but practically unattainable, and amplifying the psychological burden of courtship as they had to conceal or regulate their emotions to avoid social censure, embarrassment, or rejection. In addition, the intricate rules governing social interaction, ranging from the presence of chaperones, proper conduct at public gatherings, and the timing and manner of correspondence, to the strategic use of calling cards and adherence to etiquette-added layers of complexity and stress. As individuals constantly monitored their behavior and the reactions of others, interpreting subtle signals, assessing risks, and calculating the social acceptability of each action, all while managing the emotional turbulence generated by desire, affection, and the anticipation of rejection or approval. The requirement to conform to rigid expectations often forced young people to engage in performative behaviors that masked their true feelings, as smiling, polite conversation and outward expressions of decorum became tools to navigate social hierarchies, rather than authentic means of emotional expression, leading to a sense of isolation, anxiety, and frustration, as personal agency was repeatedly subordinated to external judgment and social protocol. Moreover, the long delays inherent in correspondence, the slow progression of courtship due to supervision and financial negotiation, and the constant vigilance required to avoid scandal or misinterpretation created an emotional pressure cooker, amplifying the intensity of anticipation, fear, and disappointment, and forcing young people to develop patience and social intelligence far beyond what might have been required in a less structured society. Ultimately, the emotional toll of class-conscious courtship in Victorian England was substantial, shaping not only the experiences of individual lovers, but also their understanding of social dynamics, personal agency, and the limitations imposed by wealth, status, and familial expectation, demonstrating that the pursuit of romantic connection in this era was as much an exercise in navigating psychological and societal complexity as it was an expression of genuine affection, leaving young men and women perpetually balancing the competing demands of heart, social position, and family approval, often at great personal emotional cost. In Victorian England, the art of courtship was inseparable from the stringent and often absurd rules governing dress, grooming, and overall appearance, transforming what might have been simple human interaction into a meticulously choreographed display of social propriety, class awareness, and moral virtue, and forcing young men and women to dedicate immense time, energy, and resources to meeting expectations that were simultaneously symbolic, performative, and laden with hidden meaning, as every garment, accessory, and gesture served as a signifier of wealth, taste, status, and moral character. For young women, this meant adhering to the strict dictates of corsets, high-necked gowns, elaborate hairstyles, gloves, and carefully chosen accessories, each selected not only for aesthetic appeal, but to convey modesty, refinement, and obedience to societal norms, while avoiding any hint of forwardness, frivolity, or impropriety, as a single misjudged element could provoke gossip, disapproval, or social exclusion, potentially undermining their prospects for marriage and social advancement. Young men were similarly constrained, expected to demonstrate financial stability, taste, and decorum through tailored suits, waistcoats, polished shoes, and neatly styled hair, signaling both respectability and competence, while subtle aspects of their presentations, such as the choice of gloves, hat, or walking, can carry coded messages about social standing and personal refinement. all carefully scrutinized by families, peers, and potential suitors, turning the simple act of dressing into a strategic, psychologically demanding endeavor. Beyond clothing, rules extended to posture, gestures, facial expressions, and even the manner of walking or bowing, creating an environment in which personal expression was heavily mediated by external expectations, and where the natural spontaneity of social interaction was replaced by a constant awareness of observation, potential judgment, and the necessity of conforming to the ideals of Victorian virtue, beauty, and propriety. This attention to appearance also reinforced class divisions, as only those with sufficient resources could afford the proper attire, grooming, and accessories necessary to participate fully in socially sanctioned courtship rituals, further limiting romantic possibilities and emphasizing the transactional nature of love in this era. The psychological impact of these rules was substantial, as young people learned to manage self-consciousness, anxiety, and performance stress while attempting to project confidence, charm, and attractiveness within the rigid confines of socially approved presentation. And even minor deviations in ill-fitted dress, a slightly crooked hat, or a scuffed shukit provoke embarrassment or signal unworthiness, reinforcing the sense that personal feelings and emotional expression were secondary to appearances and social correctness. Ultimately, the Victorian obsession with dress and appearance created a courtship culture in which style, elegance, and performance were as critical to romantic success as character, wit, or compatibility, transforming daily life into a stage for social theater in which young men and women were actors in a ritualized play of propriety, status, and attraction, demonstrating that in this society, love was inseparable from image, and that the elaborate, often comical rules of dress were a defining and inescapable element of the Victorian dating experience. In Victorian England, the pursuit of romantic approval was inextricably tied to rigid, often absurd beauty standards and a society-wide obsession with outward appearance, creating an environment in which young men and women were compelled to adhere to strict ideals of physical presentation while simultaneously contending with hygiene practices that by modern standards would seem grotesquely inadequate or even unhealthy, and where the tension between social expectation and bodily reality generated both humor and anxiety, as individuals struggled to reconcile the desire to appear attractive with the physical limitations and discomforts imposed by fashion and the era's hygiene conventions. For women, this often meant the torturous combination of tightly laced corsets, layers of heavy clothing, restrictive undergarments, and elaborate hairstyles designed to signal modesty, status, and refinement, all while attempting to maintain a pale complexion, delicately rouged cheeks, and the appearance of effortless charm, despite the fact that regular bathing was limited. Perfumed powders were applied liberally to mask odors, and hair treatments often involved hazardous substances, demonstrating that Victorian beauty standards frequently prioritized perception over health, comfort, or practicality. Men, meanwhile, were expected to maintain a polished, groomed appearance through meticulous attention to clothing, shoes, hair, and facial hair. But their hygiene practices were similarly constrained by societal norms. Limited bathing and the widespread use of heavy perfumes or powders to mask natural odors creating a paradoxical situation in which attractiveness required immense effort and social knowledge, yet was often undermined by the very physical conditions imposed by the era's limited understanding of cleanliness and sanitation. The societal obsession with beauty extended beyond clothing and grooming into posture, gait, and expression, as young people were taught to walk gracefully, hold themselves with dignity, and convey subtle emotional cues through carefully controlled facial expressions, gestures, and glances, all while projecting health, virtue, and refinement in accordance with idealized standards that often bore little relation to individual comfort or natural behavior. This performance of beauty and propriety was observed not only by potential partners but also by family members, chaperones, and the broader social network, whose judgment could determine marriage prospects, social standing, and personal reputation, adding psychological strain to an already physically demanding regimen. The combination of strict beauty ideals and inadequate hygiene practices frequently produced situations of irony and absurdity, as young women endured physical discomfort and risk to achieve the appearance of perfection, while men navigated the conflicting demands of grooming, fashion, and bodily care within a society that simultaneously prized elegance and ignored practical health considerations, creating a social theater in which attraction was cultivated through endurance, performance, and compliance with arbitrary aesthetic norms rather than natural appeal or personality. Ultimately, Victorian beauty standards and the concomitant hygiene practices imposed a profound psychological and physical burden on young people, shaping their experiences of courtship, self-perception, and social interaction, and reinforcing the notion that love, desirability, and marital opportunity were closely tied to appearances, conformity, and performance, leaving young men and women perpetually negotiating the tension between social expectation, personal comfort, and the absurdly exacting ideals of a culture obsessed with superficial perfection and outward display. In Victorian England, the pursuit of feminine beauty and social acceptance often came at a severe physical cost, as young women were expected to conform to extreme standards of dress and grooming, the most notorious of which were the tightly laced corsets and elaborate hairstyles that dominated fashion and defined propriety, creating a paradoxical environment in which appearance, status, and perceived virtue demanded discomfort, restriction, and even physical suffering. Yet these same standards were enforced by families, society, and potential suitors who judged character, morality, and desirability based on the ability to endure such constraints gracefully. Corsets, often singed to dangerously small waists, reshaped the body, restricted breathing, and compressed internal organs, making daily movement, exercise, and even basic comfort an ordeal. And yet these painful garments were considered essential for demonstrating refinement, elegance, and adherence to societal norms, signaling not only beauty but also the discipline and obedience expected of a proper Victorian woman. Hairstyles added another layer of complexity and physical strain, with hair piled high, intricately curled, braided, or adorned with pins, combs, ribbons, and even decorative flowers, often requiring hours of daily maintenance, assistance from maids or family members, and the application of hazardous substances such as oils, pomades, and powders to achieve the desired look, creating a spectacle that was both impressive and physically taxing, while simultaneously serving as a social signal of wealth, patience, and attention to detail. The combined demands of corsetry and elaborate hairstyling were particularly punishing, as women were expected to maintain impeccable posture, carry themselves with poise, and move gracefully despite the physical constraints imposed on their bodies, leading to chronic discomfort, fainting, and even long-term health consequences. Yet, any display of weakness or discomfort could be interpreted as a lack of refinement, moral fortitude, or social readiness, leaving women to perform a delicate balancing act between endurance and presentation. Men, observing these performances, often evaluated the success of a young woman's appearance not merely in terms of beauty, but as evidence of her social intelligence, upbringing, and ability to conform to expectations, meaning that physical suffering became a currency in the social economy of courtship, where pain, restraint, and aesthetic display were inseparable from desirability, status, and marital prospects. The psychological impact of these practices was equally significant, as young women internalized the belief that their worth, moral character, and romantic potential were bound to their ability to perform extreme aesthetic standards, creating a constant tension between personal comfort, health, and the relentless demand for visual perfection, and cultivating resilience, anxiety, and strategic self-management as essential tools for social survival. Ultimately, the combination of hair, corsets, and the struggle to breathe encapsulated the absurd, painful, and theatrical dimensions of Victorian femininity, turning daily life into a physically demanding and psychologically fraught performance in which beauty, propriety, and marital opportunity were inseparable from endurance, obedience, and social compliance, and leaving young women both fascinated and exasperated by the elaborate, often torturous rituals that defined their desirability, social standing, and role in courtship. In Victorian England, men's fashion, while often perceived as simpler than women's, was governed by its own intricate and socially demanding rules that transformed courtship, social standing, and personal expression into a high-stakes performance, as young men were expected to display wealth, refinement, and moral character through carefully curated attire, precise grooming, and adherence to strict conventions that dictated clothing, accessories, posture, and even gestures, creating an environment in which appearance, decorum, and social awareness were as critical to success in romance and society as character, intelligence, or charm. From the tailored waistcoat, frock coat, and polished boots to the meticulously styled hair, mustache, or beard, every element of male dress functioned as a coded message about social rank, financial stability, and cultural sophistication, and any deviation from accepted norms, such as ill-fitting trousers, scuffed shoes, untidy hair, or improper combinations of clothing could provoke subtle criticism, social exclusion, or disapproval from peers, family, or potential suitors. The obsession with men's fashion extended beyond mere clothing to encompass the careful management of accessories, including gloves, hats, canes, pocket watches, and handkerchiefs, each item carrying symbolic weight, signaling taste, etiquette, and attention to detail, while also providing a visual shorthand for wealth, refinement, and conformity to societal standards, and creating a continuous pressure to present oneself flawlessly at all public appearances, social events, and interactions with potential romantic partners. Grooming played an equally significant role, as men were expected to maintain polished shoes, trimmed facial hair, and neat hairstyles, reflecting both discipline and the ability to adhere to cultural ideals of masculinity, sophistication, and control, while simultaneously communicating respect for the social context, the observing family, and the potential partner. A poorly groomed appearance was interpreted not only as laziness or incompetence, but as a moral failing, a lack of ambition, or disrespect toward the social hierarchy. Social rituals such as attending dances, dinners, or walks further amplified the stakes of fashion, as men were constantly evaluated for their ability to navigate etiquette while maintaining impeccable appearance, subtly signaling confidence, refinement, and eligibility, and demonstrating that courtship success was inseparable from the mastery of visual and performative codes, rather than purely emotional expression. The psychological implications of this obsession were significant, as young men learned to internalize social expectations, monitor their own appearance meticulously, and cultivate a constant awareness of perception and judgment, balancing the desire to express individuality with the necessity of conforming to rigidly defined standards that governs status, attraction, and social mobility. Ultimately, Victorian men's fashion, with its complex rules, coded signals, and social pressures, mirrored the absurd, demanding, and performative nature of women's fashion, demonstrating that, in an era obsessed with image, propriety, and hierarchy, both sexes were subjected to elaborate rituals that prioritized appearance, decorum, and social signaling above comfort, spontaneity, or personal freedom, leaving young men to navigate a world in which elegance, correctness, and strategic presentation were essential for both romantic success and social survival. In Victorian England, courtship was less a natural expression of emotion than a meticulously choreographed social theater in which appearances, performance, and adherence to rigid etiquette dictated the success or failure of romantic pursuits, creating a society in which young men and women were constantly acting, observing, and interpreting signals within highly codified frameworks of behavior, attire, and social interaction, and where genuine feelings were often subordinated to the demands of propriety, reputation, and familial approval. Every gesture, glance, and word had meaning, and individuals learned early that their ability to project refinement, restraint, and social intelligence could determine marriage prospects, social standing, and even the perception of personal character, transforming the private domain of love into a public spectacle in which audience, critic, and performer were all inextricably intertwined. From the moment a young woman left her home in her carefully arranged dress and hairstyle to attend a promenade, afternoon tea, or formal dance, she was engaged in a performance of virtue, beauty, and social awareness. Her movements, posture, and expressions scrutinized not only by potential suitors, but also by chaperones, family members, and peers, each evaluating whether she adhered to expectations of modesty, elegance, and poise, while subtly signaling interest or social compatibility. And every minor deviation risked gossip, scandal, or exclusion, making the act of courtship a high-stakes psychological balancing act. Young men, too, participated in this theatricality, carefully curating their attire, grooming, and mannerisms to signal wealth, refinement, and moral competence, while interpreting the coded behaviors of women and their families to gauge interest, respectability, and suitability, creating a continuous feedback loop of observation, calculation, and subtle signaling, where missteps, whether a poorly timed gesture, inappropriate word, or lapse in decorum, could irreversibly damage prospects. This performative aspect extended to the structure of social interactions themselves, from calling cards and carefully composed letters to staged visits, dances, and walks, all conducted under the scrutiny of chaperones and social networks, and all adhering to unspoken rules that transformed even ordinary conversation into a carefully managed performance of restraint, charm, and social intelligence, leaving little room for spontaneity, natural humor, or genuine emotional display. The emotional consequences of living in this social theater were significant, as young people constantly negotiated the tension between their personal desires, emotional impulses, and the performance required by societal norms, often cultivating patience, strategic thinking, and self-discipline, while experiencing anxiety, frustration, and longing, amplified by the slow, codified pace of interactions. Ultimately, Victorian courtship as theater demonstrated that love and desire were inseparable from social expectation, performance, and the maintenance of appearances, creating a culture in which success in romance depended as much on acting skill, visual impression, and social literacy as on personal character or emotional compatibility, and leaving young men and women perpetually navigating the interplay between authenticity and artifice, desire and decorum, emotion and societal judgment, in a world where appearances were everything and love was performed on a stage with audiences, critics, and strict rules for every movement. In Victorian England, courtship was less a natural expression of emotion than a meticulously choreographed social theater in which appearances, performance, and adherence to rigid etiquette dictated the success or failure of romantic pursuits, creating a society in which young men and women were constantly acting, observing, and interpreting signals within highly codified frameworks of behavior, attire, and social interaction, and where genuine feelings were often subordinated to the demands of propriety, reputation, and familial approval. Every gesture, glance, and word, and individuals learned early that their ability to project refinement, restraint, and social intelligence could determine marriage prospects, social standing, and even the perception of personal character, transforming the private domain of love into a public spectacle in which audience, critic, and performer were all inextricably intertwined. From the moment a young woman left her home in her carefully arranged dress and hairstyle to attend a promenade, afternoon tea, or formal dance, she was engaged in a performance of virtue, beauty, and social awareness. Her movements, posture, and expressions scrutinized not only by potential suitors, but also by chaperones, family members, and peers, each evaluating whether she adhered to expectations of modesty, elegance, and poise, while subtly signaling interest or social compatibility. And every minor deviation risked gossip, scandal, or exclusion, making the act of courtship a high-stakes psychological balancing act. Young men, too, participated in this theatricality, carefully curating their attire, grooming, and mannerisms to signal wealth, refinement, and moral competence, while interpreting the coded behaviors of women and their families to gauge interest, respectability, and suitability, creating a continuous feedback loop of observation, calculation, and subtle signaling. Where missteps, whether a poorly timed gesture, inappropriate word, or lapse in decorum, could irreversibly damage prospects. This performative aspect extended to the structure of social interactions themselves, from calling cards and carefully composed letters to staged visits, dances, and walks, all conducted under the scrutiny of chaperones and social networks, and all adhering to unspoken rules that transformed even ordinary conversation into a carefully managed performance of restraint, charm, and social intelligence, leaving little room for spontaneity, natural humor, or genuine emotional display. The emotional consequences of living in this social theater were significant, as young people constantly negotiated the tension between their personal desires, emotional impulses, and the performance required by societal norms, often cultivating patience, strategic thinking, and self-discipline, while experiencing anxiety, frustration, and longing amplified by the slow, codified pace of interactions. Ultimately, Victorian courtship as theater demonstrated that love and desire were inseparable from social expectation, performance, and the maintenance of appearances, creating a culture in which success in romance depended as much on acting skill, visual impression, and social literacy as on personal character or emotional compatibility, and leaving young men and women perpetually navigating the interplay between authenticity and artifice, desire and decorum, emotion and societal judgment, in a world where appearances were everything and love was performed on a stage with audiences, critics, and strict rules for every movement. In Victorian England, balls and dances were far more than opportunities for entertainment. They were complex social arenas in which courtship, reputation, and social hierarchy collided, creating a minefield of observation, performance, and subtle signaling in which every gesture, step, and glance could carry profound social meaning, and where young men and women had to navigate a labyrinth of etiquette, appearance, and timing to preserve reputation, attract suitable partners, and demonstrate propriety, making these gatherings both thrilling and terrifying for participants. From the moment guests arrived, they were acutely aware that every interaction, whether a bow, a curtsy, a dance, invitation, or a casual conversation, was subject to scrutiny, not only by potential partners, but also by chaperones, families, and peers, each interpreting subtle behaviors to assess social standing, character, and suitability for marriage, turning what might have been a joyous occasion into a high-stakes social performance in which missteps could have lasting consequences. The strict rules governing who could dance with whom, the sequence of dances, the presentation of partners, and the proper conduct during each movement created a rigid choreography that demanded skill, attention, and strategic awareness. And violations, whether accepting a dance too eagerly, showing insufficient enthusiasm, or appearing distracted, could generate gossip, disapproval, or even the derailing of a potential courtship, underscoring how appearances, timing, and subtle social signaling were as crucial as charm, wit, or compatibility. Women, in particular, faced immense pressure to appear graceful, modest, and attractive while navigating tight gowns, corsets, high heels, and elaborate hairstyles, balancing physical restraint with the need to project elegance and receptiveness, all while maintaining constant awareness of social observation, family expectations, and the ever-present risk of scandal. Their ability to negotiate these challenges was seen as a measure of poise, moral character, and social competence, determining both immediate success in the dance and longer-term prospects for marriage. Men were equally constrained, expected to demonstrate refinement, strength, and attentiveness while adhering to strict norms of invitation, conduct, and etiquette, including proper bowing, offering a hand, timing conversation appropriately, and signaling interest subtly, all while avoiding behaviors deemed inappropriate or overly forward, meaning that the act of dancing became a highly codified negotiation in which every movement was calculated to maximize social advantage while minimizing risk. Beyond the mechanics of dancing itself, these events were also arenas for observation and evaluation. Families assessed potential matches, rival suitors gauged competition, and individuals tested social boundaries, creating a network of implicit communication and surveillance in which emotional expression was both performed and interpreted, and where anxiety, anticipation, and desire were heightened by the slow, ritualized pace and the constant awareness of judgment. Ultimately, Victorian balls and dances exemplified the theatrical, high-stakes, and often absurd nature of courtship, combining elegance, entertainment, and social strategy into a single event in which appearances, behavior, and subtle signaling were paramount, leaving young people to navigate a complex interplay of desire, propriety, and societal expectation, and demonstrating that in this era, romance was never merely private or spontaneous, but a public performance conducted on a stage where every step, glance, and gesture carried meaning far beyond the dance floor. If you thought talking to someone was simple, congratulations, you clearly haven't survived a Victorian social event. In 19th century England, conversation at a party was basically a minefield covered in velvet gloves. One misstep, one wrong word, one hint of enthusiasm, and suddenly your reputation was in shreds. Your suitor's family was clutching pearls, and the chaperone is glaring at you like you just kicked. Every sentence had to be perfectly calibrated, witty enough to show intelligence, polite enough to avoid scandal, complimentary enough to attract interest, but never so flirty that you were branded forward or, worse, desperate. For women, the pressure was insane. Speak too much, and you're talkative. Speak too little, and you're cold and haughty. Laugh too loudly, and you're a harlot. But don't laugh at all, and you're humorless. Even your body language was scrutinized. Lean too far in, and you're forward. Sit too rigidly, and you're stiff. Glance at the wrong man, and prepare for gossip that will haunt you for the next decade. Men had it rough too, but in a slightly different way. They had to be charming without being lecherous, clever without being arrogant, and attentive without appearing desperate, all while navigating the terrifying landscape of calling cards, chaperones, and invisible social hierarchies. Mispronounce a word, misunderstand a joke, or reference something to scandalous, and suddenly your chances of securing a proper dance or, worse, a future proposal vanish. And heaven forbid you try to express genuine enthusiasm. because enthusiasm in Victorian England had to be coded like Morse. Subtle eye contact, gentle nods, faint smiles, and a carefully measured tone that screamed, "I am interested," but not inappropriate. Conversations were more than small talk. They were strategic chess matches where every compliment, every story, every carefully timed laugh could signal intelligence, refinement, wealth, or moral virtue. And failure to perform perfectly meant public humiliation or a lifetime of whispered gossip. It was exhausting, absurd, and somehow everyone survived it while still managing to flirt, exchange secret glances, and occasionally miraculously fall in love. The psychological gymnastics required to navigate this conversational tightrope were immense, as young people constantly calculated risk, interpreted social signals, and performed the delicate balance between genuine human emotion and strict social expectation, all under the watchful eyes of families, peers, and relentless chaperones. In short, attending a Victorian social event was like starring in a live-action etiquette survival show, where the stakes were your love life, social standing, and personal dignity. And even the smallest misstep could have dramatic consequences. And yet, somehow, young Victorians managed to flirt and navigate this bizarre verbal labyrinth with grace, poise, and the occasional cheeky spark of rebellion, proving that conversation in the 19th century was less about words and more about surviving the social jungle while keeping your corset, hat, or tailcoat intact. Victorian introductions were basically social landmines disguised as polite greetings, and anyone unlucky enough to step on one quickly learned that a single misstep could ruin their entire evening, more terrifyingly, their future marriage prospects. In 19th century England, introductions were never casual. You couldn't just walk up and say hello. Every greeting had to be orchestrated according to a complex hierarchy of social rules, which dictated exactly who could introduce whom, in what order, with what tone, and using what degree of bow or curtsy, all under the watchful eyes of chaperones, family members, and gossip-hungry friends. If a young man bypassed the proper channels to speak directly to a young woman, he risked being labeled presumptuous or scandalous. If a woman accepted an introduction without the proper formality, she could be branded forward, or worse, unworthy of future suitors. The process of making an introduction involved a delicate dance of verbal cues, gestures, and eye contact. The introducer had to convey social legitimacy. The person being introduced had to respond with just the right combination of politeness and interest. And everyone else in the room was silently judging whether the interaction had adhered to invisible codes of conduct. Even minor errors, such as addressing someone with the wrong title, mispronouncing a name, or forgetting a subtle curtsy or could trigger whispered commentary and long-lasting reputational consequences. For young women, the stakes were especially high. Being seen with the wrong person, accepting an introduction too eagerly, or showing too much curiosity could instantly tarnish a reputation and close doors to suitable matches. Whereas ignoring an introduction or appearing aloof risked appearing cold, haughty, or ungracious. Men, meanwhile, had to master the subtle art of appearing interested without seeming overeager, polite without appearing submissive, and socially aware without overthinking every word or gesture. A balancing act that required practice, nerves of steel, and perhaps a hidden flask of courage. The choreography extended to indirect introductions as well. Sometimes an intermediary would need to mention your name, hint at your social value, or subtly vouch for your character before a proper meeting could even occur, meaning that much of the courtship game relied on reputation, rumor, and strategic social maneuvering, as much as personal charm or attractiveness. This made introductions a high-stakes performance. One wrong word, one misread glance, and the opportunity for connection could vanish in an instant, replaced by whispered gossip, judgmental stares, and the faint hum of scandal in the parlors of polite society. Yet somehow, amidst all the rules, restrictions, and looming threats of social disaster, Victorians managed to flirt, signal interest, and even fall in love, carefully navigating the treacherous waters of formal introductions with grace, strategy, and the occasional stolen glance. In short, introductions in Victorian society were less about meeting someone and more about surviving a social gauntlet where elegance, timing, and impeccable etiquette could make or break your prospects, and where a single misstep could turn a hopeful courtship into a lifetime of whispered judgment. Victorian courtship was basically an elaborate, socially sanctioned obstacle course disguised as polite behavior, and nowhere was this more painfully obvious than in the countless rituals that dictated every interaction between young men and women, turning even a simple stroll in the garden into a anxiety-inducing spectacle of social calculation, subtle signaling, and absurd etiquette. Every gesture carried meaning. A bow could convey respect or interest. A smile might signal flirtation or arrogance, depending on who was watching, and a hand lightly brushed against another could be read as scandalous, romantic, or completely inappropriate, leaving participants constantly second-guessing their every move. Walking together, sitting together, sharing a dance, exchanging letters, all were governed by codified rules that seemed designed to generate maximum tension and discomfort, rather than enjoyment, forcing young Victorians to act like performers in a theater where the slightest misstep could ruin their chances at romance or social standing. Chaperones lurked like hawks, measuring eye contact, noting laughter, and silently judging proximity, ensuring that no moment of genuine emotional expression could escape scrutiny, while families subtly manipulated situations to protect reputations and reinforce social hierarchies, turning the most innocent exchanges into calculated maneuvers in a game of social chess. The pressure to conform to these rituals was immense. Women had to appear modest, delicate, and attentive without seeming too eager or forward, managing posture, gaze, and even breathing, all while wearing restrictive corsets and wide skirts that made physical grace an athletic feat. Men had to demonstrate refinement, patience, and tact while interpreting subtle signals, approaching without appearing desperate, and orchestrating gestures that communicated interest without transgressing any of the myriad unwritten rules that governed acceptable behavior. Even correspondence, the supposed refuge of private emotion, was heavily written, with carefully composed letters, formal salutations, and coded phrases replacing straightforward expression, ensuring that love itself became an exercise in strategic communication and social literacy rather than spontaneous affection. This created a surreal mixture of tension, comedy, and ingenuity as young people devised ways to show interest, flirt subtly, and create shared understanding without violating the complex web of expectations, often relying on glances, small gifts, or carefully timed conversational cues to navigate a labyrinth of restrictions, all while attempting to maintain composure and avoid embarrassment. In short, the rituals of Victorian courtship transformed everyday interactions into theatrical performances where emotional authenticity, personal desire, and human spontaneity were constrained by the absurd rules of etiquette, social observation, and familial oversight, leaving participants exhausted, hyper-aware, and perpetually calculating, yet somehow still managing to experience affection, attraction, and romance within a framework that often seemed intentionally designed to frustrate and amuse in equal measure. It was simultaneously elegant, suffocating, and ridiculous, a true testament to how Victorian society turned courtship into an elaborate dance of social mastery, where surviving the performance was as important as securing the heart of the person you admired. In Victorian England, expressing romantic interest wasn't as simple as saying, "I like you," or sliding into someone's D. Young lovers had to navigate a mind-boggling system of letters, calling cards, and coded gestures, where a single misplaced comma or improperly folded note could be the difference between a lifelong romance and social ruin. The calling card, a small, stiff rectangle of paper, was essentially a social resume, a secret love letter disguised as etiquette, and it came with rules so complex that modern dating apps would blush. You had to present it at exactly the right time, in the right hand, with a specific gesture, and then wait patiently, excruciatingly, for a response, all while hoping the recipient didn't interpret your attempt as overly forward, desperate, or scandalous. Letters were equally complicated. Each word, phrase, and even punctuation mark carried hidden meaning, forming a language of subtlety that only the socially savvy could decode. A carefully placed compliment might signal admiration, while a casual anecdote could be interpreted, and a single forgotten salutation could land you on the family's permanent never again list. Young women had to balance charm with propriety, crafting letters that expressed interest without betraying too much desire, and men had to demonstrate intelligence, wit, and subtle confidence, all while adhering to conventions that made straightforward communication practically impossible. And if that wasn't enough, the folded note itself was part of the message, the direction of the fold, the side of the envelope presented, even the color of the ink could carry social meaning, creating an almost absurd level of precision for something as simple as saying "I like you" beyond letters and cards. There were also secret codes, glances across the room, the placement of a fan, the manner of holding gloves or handkerchiefs, all signaling romantic interest or disinterest with the finesse of a covert operation. Misreading a signal could lead to catastrophe, a blush misinterpreted, a fan fluttered at the wrong time, a card handed over in the incorrect position, and suddenly your social reputation or your chance at a dance or future marriage was at risk. Yet, despite the ridiculous complexity, young Victorians became masters of the subtle art of indirect communication, finding ways to express affection, test interest, and maintain propriety all at once, turning even the simplest interaction into a game of wit, patience, and strategic observation. These coded rituals weren't just absurd, they were psychologically intense, demanding constant vigilance, calculation, and emotional self-control, as one misstep could have ripple effects through the social web for weeks or even months. In short, Victorian love letters, calling cards, and secret codes were a theatrical, high-stakes form of courtship where intelligence, subtlety, and social savvy were more important than courage or passion, and where surviving the etiquette battlefield was as crucial as winning the heart of the person you admired, proving that in this era, romance was an elaborate performance. And even I, like you, came with 1,000 rules. In Victorian England, flirting wasn't a casual smile or a playful wink. It was a full-blown secret language, complete with invisible rules, hidden meanings, and a complexity that would make even a spy agency blush, because one misinterpreted glance could spark scandal, while one perfectly timed fan flick could ignite a lifelong romance. Young women and men spent hours mastering the subtleties of this intricate code, where the direction of a glance, the tilt of a head, the flutter of eyelashes, or the delicate movement of a fan could communicate interest, disinterest, or even urgent secret messages, all without a single word leaving the lips, and all under the scrutinizing gaze of chaperones, family members, and the entire social circle who were waiting for the first hint of impropriety. For women, the stakes were absurdly high. A prolonged stare might signal attraction, but if the same stare lingered too long, she risked being labeled forward, flirtatious, or morally questionable. A half-smile conveyed interest, but the wrong type of smile could suggest arrogance or coyness. Men had to read these signals accurately while projecting charm, confidence, and refinement, all while ensuring they didn't appear overeager, rude, or socially ignorant, because failing in interpretation could doom their chances of courtship entirely. The gestures went beyond glances. A lightly tapped fan could mean "I am interested." A handkerchief held just so could suggest longing. A certain way of walking past someone or tilting one's hat could indicate admiration or invitation. And these nonverbal codes were as essential to courtship as conversation, letter writing, or formal introductions. Misreading a signal could lead to humiliation, gossip, or complete social rejection. Yet mastering this system allowed the socially savvy to communicate volumes without uttering a single syllable, turning every interaction into a thrilling, high-stakes dance of subtlety and strategy. This secret language extended to public gatherings, promenades, and even private garden walks, where each movement, gesture, or glance had to be executed with precision, timing, and elegance, creating a constant psychological tightrope. Young people had to anticipate reactions, maintain composure, and decode signals simultaneously, all while wearing corsets, gloves, or restrictive clothing that made subtle body language physically taxing. The absurdity, intensity, and creativity required for this nonverbal courtship forged a generation of individuals highly skilled in observation, self-control, and strategic thinking, who could convey desire, gauge interest, and perform propriety simultaneously, often while secretly giggling at how ridiculous it all was. Ultimately, the secret language of glances and gestures in Victorian courtship illustrates how romance in this era was as much a theatrical performance as an emotional connection, a world in which subtlety, timing, and skill could win hearts. more effectively than bold declarations of love, and where the ability to communicate silently through a carefully orchestrated combination of eye movements, gestures, and poise became an essential survival skill for young lovers navigating a society obsessed with propriety, reputation, and coded signals of attraction. In Victorian England, once a letter was sent, a calling card delivered, or a secret signal made, the hardest part of courtship began: the interminable, nerve-wracking wait for a response. A period so excruciating it could drive even the calmest young person to obsessive paranoia, creative daydreaming, and multiple dramatic sighs per hour. Unlike modern instant messaging, there was no seen checkmark, no quick emoji, no reassurance, just days, weeks, or even months of uncertainty, during which the mind raced, the imagination ran wild, and every mundane event could be misinterpreted as a social signal, a hidden meaning, or a silent judgment. Did she smile at me when she received my letter, or was it a polite act of indifference? Did he deliver my calling card with the right posture, or did he make a subtle error that ruined everything? Families and chaperones made the waiting even more torturous, scrutinizing every interaction, asking endless questions, and dropping subtle hints or warnings that made the situation feel like a high-stakes psychological thriller. During this limbo, young Victorians developed remarkably and often comical skills in patience, self-restraint, and the careful management of appearances, because even a hint of visible anxiety or disappointment could be interpreted as impropriety or desperation, potentially sabotaging the delicate process entirely. They might rehearse imagined conversations, write secret drafts of replies, or analyze every glance, gesture, and word from previous encounters, turning ordinary moments into a dramatic theater of anticipation, suspense, and covert emotional expression. The absurdity of the situation was often heightened by the slow pace of communication. A single letter required hand delivery or a trusted servant, and postal delays or misread intentions could multiply tension exponentially, making the simplest exchange feel like a lifelong test of endurance, strategy, and social savvy. This waiting game was not only emotionally taxing, but also socially performative, because young people had to maintain composure and project refinement in public while privately suffering from anxiety, frustration, or giddy excitement. A duality that created both dramatic tension and humorous scenarios for those witnessing their subtle, anxious maneuvers. Yet, despite the absurdity, intensity, and sheer torment of waiting, these pauses allowed for creativity, ingenuity, and subtle social maneuvering. Carefully timed inquiries, orchestrated encounters, or indirect questions could be used to test interest, interpret social signals, and maintain the delicate balance of propriety, proving that patience, observation, and strategic thinking were as vital to courtship as charm, beauty, or attraction. Ultimately, the long wait for a response in Victorian courtship was a test of nerves, endurance, and social intelligence, transforming the simple act of communication into a theatrical ordeal of suspense, expectation, and subtle strategy, where love, reputation, and social survival all hung in the balance, and where young men and women learned to navigate the absurd, exhilarating, and psychologically intricate world of romance without modern conveniences, instant reassurance, or a single direct text message. In Victorian England, If you thought courting was complicated before, add a chaperone into the mix, and suddenly, every romantic encounter became a high-stakes exercise in stealth, strategy, and pure absurdity. Because young lovers were expected to behave with the utmost decorum while constantly evading the ever-watchful eyes of older, judgmental relatives whose primary mission seemed to be sniffing out the tiniest hint of impropriety. Chaperones were everywhere, hovering discreetly at the edge of parlors, sitting silently in carriages, or lingering by the doorway during garden walks, their presence transforming every glance, gesture, or whispered word into a potential scandal, and forcing young men and women to develop ingenious methods for communication, secrecy, and subtlety. Secret meetings became an art form, a strategically timed stroll in the garden, a pre-arranged note slipped between fingers, or a carefully orchestrated seating arrangement at a social gathering could allow fleeting interaction without attracting disapproving attention, requiring precision, creativity, and nerves of steel. Because even the slightest slip could undo weeks of careful courtship. Women, constrained by corsets, wide skirts, and strict expectations of modesty, had to signal interest with subtle cues-fan movements, slight tilts of the head, barely noticeable glances while simultaneously pretending to ignore the young man's presence, all under the hypothetical gaze of a chaperone lurking in the shadows. Men, meanwhile, had to balance charm, attentiveness, and social tact with the stealth of a spy, approaching the woman with just the right measure of propriety, maintaining posture and composure, and delivering compliments or messages without giving any evidence of clandestine intent. The absurdity of the situation was heightened by the fact that chaperones were often relatives who knew the social code just as well, meaning young lovers were essentially engaged in a game of cat and mouse, where strategy, timing, and subtlety were as essential as mutual affection, and every successful encounter felt like a minor victory worthy of celebration. Letters and calling cards were often coordinated to facilitate these secret exchanges, with messages designed to indicate availability, interest, or the time and place for a fleeting meeting, all while preserving absolute discretion and the illusion of perfect propriety. The psychological tension created by these constraints turned even brief interactions into dramatic episodes, full of anticipation, humor, and often comically exaggerated anxiety. As young people learned to read signals, predict movements, and anticipate chaperone behavior, cultivating a blend of courage, cunning, and social intelligence that was arguably more valuable than physical attractiveness alone. Ultimately, the presence of chaperones transformed Victorian courtship into a theatrical, strategic, and often hilariously absurd performance, in which young men and women had to navigate a labyrinth of rules, social norms, and familial oversight while still managing to flirt, communicate, and fall in love, demonstrating that, in this era, romance required stealth, creativity, and a sense of humor just as much as charm, beauty, or mutual attraction, and turning every secret meeting into a delicate, thrilling, and laughably intricate dance of desire and discretion. In Victorian England, after weeks, months, or even years of elaborate glances, coded gestures, meticulously folded letters, and stealthy secret meetings, the courtship marathon culminated in the grand finale, the proposal. acceptance, and the inevitable scrutiny of family, neighbors, and society at large, transforming what might have been a simple declaration of love into a theatrical, high-pressure spectacle of social judgment and emotional tension. Proposals were rarely spontaneous. They were carefully orchestrated events, often requiring parental consent, approval from multiple relatives, and the alignment of social circumstances to ensure propriety and avoid scandal. And even then, the stakes were absurdly high, because a single misstep, to eager word, an ill-chosen phrase, a poorly executed bow could instantly ruin reputations and social standing. Young men had to present themselves with the perfect blend of confidence, humility, and decorum, delivering compliments that were charming yet measured, while subtly demonstrating financial stability, moral character, and the ability to provide a respectable household all without seeming arrogant or presumptuous. Young women, meanwhile, were expected to respond with the perfect mixture of grace, modesty, and enthusiasm, conveying interest without appearing forward, maintaining posture and composure, and subtly signaling approval while ensuring that their families witnessed their propriety. Every element of the environment contributed to the drama: the carefully chosen parlor or drawing room, the placement of furniture, the arrangement of onlookers, and even the timing of the proposal were all choreographed to maintain the illusion of decorum. Elegance. Acceptance was equally complicated, as young women had to convey joy and consent while adhering to every social expectation. And the public nature of the declaration meant that friends, family, and servants became instant witnesses, turning a private, emotional decision into a performance that could influence social standing, reputation, and future courtship for others in the household. The absurdity of Victorian courtship reached its peak in this phase. Love, desire, and personal preference were filtered through layers of etiquette, social expectation, and public observation, meaning that even the happiest engagement carried an undercurrent of stress, calculation, and performative grace. Once accepted, the couple immediately entered another phase of scrutiny: announcements in society columns, visits from relatives and neighbors, and the endless commentary of acquaintances all transformed the engagement into a public spectacle, where congratulations were delivered alongside subtle evaluations of propriety, taste, and social strategy, and where a mismanaged smile, a poorly worded card, or a minor lapse in decorum could undo weeks of careful social navigation. Yet, despite the absurdity, tension, and theatricality, proposals and acceptances also carried the thrill, joy, and romance that had been cultivated through months of covert glances, letters, and secret meetings, proving that Victorian courtship, while overly complicated and hilariously restrictive, could still produce genuine emotional connection, strategic triumph, and if navigated successfully, the ultimate reward: mutual love sanctioned by society. In essence, the grand finale of Victorian courtship demonstrates that romance was never just about emotion. It was about endurance, intelligence, subtlety, and flawless social performance. A high-stakes theater in which the careful orchestration of words, gestures, and appearances determined not only personal happiness, but also social success, and where love, etiquette, and public scrutiny merged into the ultimate act of romantic drama.